Willow Lawson trembled as the first fall rains pelted the crude shelter she'd built high in the Wyoming hills outside Kelton. 5 months pregnant, and showing more each day, she pulled her threadbare blanket tighter around her shoulders and tried not to think of the warmth of her father's mercantile store down in the valley. It was October 1876, and winter would soon blanket the mountains. She knew she couldn't survive here much longer, but the shame of returning to town was too great to bear. The whispers would follow her everywhere. Unmarried, ruined. The once respected daughter of Kelton's most prominent businessman, now fallen from grace. "We'll manage," she whispered to the child growing inside her, though her voice lacked conviction. The small cave she'd found and improved upon over the past 2 months provided minimal shelter. She'd gathered enough berries and roots to supplement the dwindling supplies she'd brought when she fled town. But it wouldn't last. A gust of wind howled through the cave entrance, sending a spray of icy raindrops against her face. Willow shivered violently, her hands instinctively cradling her swollen belly. She'd made this choice to protect her family's reputation, but now she wondered if pride would be the death of both her and her unborn child. 30 miles away, Owen Jensen pulled his hat lower against the driving rain as he guided his horse along the muddy trail. His cattle drive had finished early, leaving him with more money than he'd expected, and a yearning to get back to his small ranch before winter set in properly. The trail from Cheyenne to Kelton wasn't one he traveled often, but a shortcut through the hills would save him nearly a day's ride. "Come on, Thunder," he urged his horse forward, ignoring the water dripping from his hat brim. "Just a few more hours and we'll find a dry spot to camp." Owen was 28, tall and broad-shouldered from years of hard work, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of summer sky. Unlike many cowboys who drifted from ranch to ranch, he'd managed to purchase a modest spread south of Kelton 3 years earlier. It wasn't much, just a cabin and enough grazing land for a small herd, but it was his. The rain intensified as the trail steepened, making the ascent treacherous. Thunder snorted in protest as mud sucked at his hooves. "I know, boy," Owen patted the horse's neck. "I don't like it either." As they rounded a bend, Thunder suddenly pulled up short, ears pricking forward. Owen tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. In these hills, a sudden stop could mean anything from a rattlesnake to a mountain lion or worse, bandits. "What is it?" he murmured, scanning the trail ahead. Thunder nickered softly and took a few tentative steps forward, seemingly drawn to something off the main path. Owen followed the horse's gaze and noticed a thin wisp of smoke rising from among a cluster of pines. Someone had a fire going, despite the rain. Curious and cautious in equal measure, Owen guided Thunder off the trail. If it was a traveler in trouble, he couldn't in good conscience ride past without offering aid. And if it was trouble of another sort, well, he preferred to know what lay ahead rather than be ambushed later. The smoke led him to a small clearing, but he saw no campfire. Instead, the smoke seemed to be emerging from the side of the hill itself. A cave, perhaps. Owen dismounted, tying Thunder to a pine branch and drawing his revolver. "Hello, the camp," he called out, using the traditional greeting of the trail. "Anyone there?" Inside her shelter, Willow froze at the sound of a man's voice. For 2 months, she hadn't heard another human speak. Fear gripped her. Was it someone from town? Had her father finally tracked her down? When no answer came, Owen called again. "I mean no harm. Just passing through and saw your smoke." His voice was deep and steady, with none of the hard edge Willow associated with the men who'd worked for her father. Still, she remained silent, hoping he would believe the cave abandoned and move on. Another gust of wind drove the rain sideways, and Owen shivered. The approaching night would be miserable in this weather. The cave, if it was large enough, would provide much-needed shelter. He moved closer, squinting through the rain. "I'm coming in," he announced, then ducked through the narrow entrance. The sight that greeted him was so unexpected he nearly stumbled backward. A young woman, clearly pregnant, huddled against the cave wall, her face a mask of terror. A small fire smoldered nearby, providing minimal heat and the smoke that had drawn his attention. "Madam," Owen said, quickly holstering his weapon and raising his hands to show he meant no threat. "I apologize for the intrusion." Willow pressed herself further against the rock wall. "Please leave," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Owen remained in place, taking in the meager supplies scattered around the cave: a near-empty sack of flour, some wild onions and roots, a dented tin cup. His experienced eye recognized the signs of someone unprepared for the harsh mountain conditions. "You can't stay here," he said simply. "Winter's coming early this year. First snow will be here within a week." "I have nowhere else to go," Willow replied, her chin lifting with a pride that contradicted her desperate circumstances. Owen removed his dripping hat, revealing dark hair in need of a trim. "Are you from Kelton? I could take you there or to the nearest homestead." "No." The force of her response startled them both. More quietly, she added, "I can't go back to Kelton." Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes as he glanced at her swollen belly. In small frontier towns, an unmarried woman with child faced ostracism at best, violence at worst. He'd seen it before. "I've got a place," he said carefully. "Small ranch south of town. You'd be safe there until you figure things out." Willow laughed bitterly. "With a strange man, that's how I ended up in this predicament in the first place." Her words held such pain that Owen winced. "Fair enough. But you'll die up here, madam. You and your baby both. First real cold snap and that's it." He gestured to her insufficient fire. "That won't keep you warm when the temperature drops below freezing." Willow knew he spoke the truth. Her hands were already chapped and raw, her cheeks hollow from too little food. The baby had been moving less the past few days, a worrying sign. "I don't even know your name," she said finally. "Owen Jensen. I've got a small spread about 15 miles south of Kelton. Raise some cattle, grow enough to get by." He hesitated, then added, "I don't make a habit of bringing strangers home, but I can't leave you here to die either." The rain intensified, driven by a howling wind that sent smoke billowing back into the cave. Willow coughed, her thin shoulders shaking. "I'm Willow Lawson," she admitted after a long pause. "My father owns the mercantile in Kelton." Recognition flickered in Owen's eyes. "George Lawson's daughter? I've traded at his store." Willow nodded miserably, waiting for the judgment to cross his face. It didn't come. "Winter's breathing down our necks," Owen said instead. "We need to move now if we're going to beat the worst of this storm." Willow looked around at the cave that had been her refuge and prison these past months. She thought of the cold nights ahead, the dwindling supplies, the baby that deserved more than a desperate death in the wilderness. "All right," she whispered. "I'll go with you." Owen helped gather her few possessions: a change of clothes, a small hunting knife, a locket containing her mother's portrait. Everything fit into a single bundle. Outside, thunder whinnied impatiently as Owen returned to secure Willow's belongings. "You'll ride," he told her. "I'll walk and lead." Willow stared at the tall stallion apprehensively. "I haven't ridden since I was a girl." "Thunder's gentle enough." Owen offered his cupped hands to help her mount. After a moment's hesitation, Willow placed her boot in his hands and let him boost her onto the saddle. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle as they began their descent. Owen led Thunder carefully along the slippery path, one hand on the reins, the other occasionally steadying Willow when the trail grew particularly steep. They traveled in silence for the first hour, the only sounds the squelch of mud beneath boots and hooves, the occasional distant rumble of thunder. Eventually, Willow spoke. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me." Owen considered this as he navigated around a fallen tree. "My mother was in a situation similar to yours once. No one helped her." He didn't elaborate further, but the tightness around his mouth suggested a painful memory. Willow wanted to ask more, but sensed the subject was closed. Instead, she said, "I can't pay you. I left town with only what I could carry." "Not asking for payment," Owen replied. "Just couldn't leave you up there knowing what was coming." By nightfall, they'd made it halfway down the mountain. The rain had stopped, but dark clouds threatened more to come. Owen found a sheltered overhang and helped Willow dismount. "We'll rest here for the night," he said. "Continue at first light." While Willow stretched her aching legs, Owen efficiently set up a small camp. He built a fire, laid out a bedroll for her, and produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it'll keep our strength up." Willow accepted the food gratefully. After months of near starvation, even simple trail rations tasted like a feast. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for the food, but for—" She gestured vaguely at the makeshift camp. Owen nodded, understanding what she couldn't articulate. "Get some rest. Morning comes early." He settled himself on the opposite side of the fire, using his saddle as a pillow, his rifle within easy reach. Willow watched him through the flames, this stranger who'd appeared like an answer to prayers she hadn't dared to voice. "Mr. Jensen," she said, just as his eyes were closing. "The father. He promised to marry me, then he left town when he discovered I was with child." Owen opened his eyes, his gaze steady across the firelight. "Some men aren't worth the leather of their boots," he said simply. "My father would agree with you. He wanted to hunt him down." Willow pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I couldn't bear the scandal, so I ran. And your father's been searching since. I left a note, told him not to look for me." Tears filled her eyes. "I thought I was protecting him from shame. Now I realize I was only protecting my own pride." Owen said nothing for a long moment, then spoke quietly. "Pride can keep a person alive sometimes, but it can kill just as easy." Willow nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words. "I've been a fool." "You've been surviving," he corrected. "That's never foolish." The next morning dawned clear and cold, the rain replaced by a crisp autumn sky. Owen had coffee brewing before Willow awoke, its rich aroma pulling her from a deeper sleep than she'd experienced in months. "We should reach the ranch by midday," Owen said as he handed her a steaming cup. Willow sipped gratefully, the hot liquid warming her from within. "What will happen when we get there?" Owen packed his bedroll with efficient movements. "You'll rest, eat proper food, get your strength back." He glanced at her. "After that, it's your decision. I won't force you to return to town, but I won't hold you prisoner either." They resumed their journey as the sun climbed higher, the muddy trail gradually giving way to more solid ground as they descended. By mid-morning, they had left the mountains behind and entered rolling grasslands dotted with copses of pine and aspen. "My ranch is just beyond that ridge," Owen said, pointing ahead. "It's not much, but it's solid." Willow felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. For all his kindness, Owen was still a stranger, and she was placing herself entirely in his hands. As they crested the ridge, Willow caught her first glimpse of Owen's not much a neat log cabin with a front porch, a corral holding several horses, a sturdy barn, and beyond, gentle slopes where cattle grazed. Smoke curled from the cabin's chimney. "You have someone there?" Willow asked, suddenly nervous. Owen shook his head. Mrs. Callahan from the next property checks in once a week when I'm gone, keeps the place from feeling abandoned. He gave a small smile. She's probably left a stew on the stove. Sure enough, when they reached the cabin, the aroma of beef stew greeted them. A note on the table confirmed Mrs. Callahan's visit the previous day. Owen helped Willow into a chair at the solid pine table. "Rest here. I'll tend to Thunder, then show you around." Left alone, Willow took in her surroundings. The cabin was simple but well kept. One main room with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 4 chairs, shelves stocked with provisions, and a curtained-off area she presumed was the sleeping quarters. Everything spoke of care and permanence, so different from her temporary existence in the hills. Owen returned shortly and ladled stew into bowls for them both. "Eat," he encouraged. "You need your strength." The rich stew was the first proper meal Willow had eaten in months. She tried not to wolf it down, conscious of Owen's presence across the table. "Your ranch is lovely," she said between bites. "Have you been here long?" 3 years, Owen replied. "Worked cattle drives for 10 years before that, saving every penny. This land came up for sale when the previous owner died without heirs." "And you live here alone?" A shadow crossed Owen's face. "Yes, had a partner once, but he took off for California gold 2 years back. Haven't heard from him since." After the meal, Owen showed her the rest of the cabin. Behind the curtain was indeed his sleeping area, a sturdy bed with a quilt, a chest for clothing, a small table with a Bible and a few books. "You'll take the bed," he said, brooking no argument. "I'll sleep by the fire." "I can't take your bed," Willow protested. "You're not taking it. I'm lending it." Owen's tone was firm but kind. "You need proper rest in your condition." That evening, after Owen had seen to his livestock and Willow had helped wash the dishes over his objections, they sat before the fire. The comfortable silence between them surprised Willow. With the father of her child, a smooth-talking cattle buyer who'd swept through Kelton for a weak conversation, had always felt like a performance, each trying to impress the other. "May I ask you something personal?" Willow ventured finally. Owen nodded, his eyes remaining on the dancing flames. "You said your mother was in a situation like mine. What happened to her?" Owen was quiet so long that Willow thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice lower than usual. "She wasn't married to my father. He was passing through on a cattle drive, promised to come back for her. Never did." He poked at the fire with a stick. "She was shunned by her family, had to leave her town. Ended up in a mining camp where no one asked questions about a woman with a baby and no husband." "That must have been hard," Willow said softly. "It was. She worked as a laundress, then as a cook. Died of pneumonia when I was 12. Owen looked up from the fire, meeting Willow's eyes directly. "But she never regretted keeping me. She told me that many times." Willow rested her hand on her belly, feeling the gentle movement within. "I don't regret this baby either," she said. "Just the circumstances." "Life rarely gives us perfect circumstances," Owen observed. "We just do our best with what we're given." The days that followed established a routine. Owen rose early to tend the livestock, while Willow gradually took over the cabin's upkeep. Her strength returned with regular meals and proper rest. The baby grew more active, often kicking so vigorously that Willow laughed out loud. Owen proved to be a considerate host, respecting her privacy and never prying into the details of her situation. In the evenings, they talked about books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they'd harbored. Willow discovered that beneath Owen's quiet exterior lay a thoughtful mind and dry wit that often made her smile. As November progressed, so did Willow's pregnancy. Her due date approached, bringing both anticipation and fear. "I should find a midwife," Owen said one evening as they sat by the fire. "Mrs. Callahan might know someone discreet." Willow nodded, though anxiety tightened her chest. What happens after the baby comes? She asked, voicing the question that had plagued her for weeks. Owen set aside the bridle he'd been repairing. What do you want to happen? I don't know, Willow admitted. I can't stay here indefinitely, imposing on your kindness, but I have nowhere else to go. You're not imposing, Owen said firmly, and you can stay as long as you need. A week later, Mrs. Callahan arrived with Emma Watson, a widow who served as midwife to the scattered homesteads in the area. Emma was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who examined Willow with gentle efficiency. Baby's positioned well, she announced afterward. Could come any day now. First babies often take their time, though. Mrs. Callahan, a plump, cheerful woman in her 60s, busied herself preparing meals that could be easily reheated. Owen Jensen, you make sure she rests, she instructed sternly. No heavy lifting, no long walks. Owen nodded solemnly, though Willow caught the twinkle in his eye. Mrs. Callahan had clearly been giving him orders for years. After the women left, promising to return in 3 days, Owen found Willow on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold. They think we're together, she said without preamble. Mrs. Callahan kept referring to your woman when she thought I couldn't hear. Owen leaned against the porch railing. People will think what they think. I'm not concerned with their opinions. But your reputation is mine to worry about, he interrupted gently. Besides, folks around here mind their business. It's one of the advantages of living away from town. Willow studied his profile, strong and steady in the fading light. In the weeks she'd been at the ranch, her feelings for Owen had grown increasingly complex. Gratitude had given way to respect, then to a deeper affection she was afraid to name. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. Owen turned to her, his expression softening. You don't need to thank me, having you here. He hesitated, then continued. It's been good not being alone. The moment stretched between them, filled with words neither was ready to speak. Then Willow gasped, clutching her belly. What is it? Owen was instantly alert. The baby, Willow breathed. I think it's coming. The next 12 hours tested both of them. With Emma Watson still days away, Owen sent the ranch hand who occasionally helped with the cattle to fetch her, then turned his attention to Willow. He boiled water, prepared clean linens, and stayed by Willow's side as her labor progressed. When her courage faltered, he held her hand and spoke softly of the future, painting pictures of spring flowers and summer picnics that helped her focus beyond the pain. You can do this, he told her repeatedly. You're the strongest person I know. Dawn was breaking when Emma Watson finally arrived, taking charge with brisk efficiency. 2 hours later, Willow's daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the cabin. She's perfect, Emma declared, placing the swaddled infant in Willow's arms. Exhausted but radiant, Willow gazed at her daughter's tiny face. Look what we did, she whispered. Owen, who had stepped outside during the final stages of delivery, was summoned back in. He approached the bed hesitantly, his expression a mixture of awe and tenderness as he looked at the mother and child. She's beautiful, he said softly, just like her mother. Willow felt tears spring to her eyes at the warmth in his voice. Would you like to hold her? Carefully, as if handling the most precious thing in the world, Owen took the baby in his arms. The newborn quieted immediately, seeming content in his embrace. What will you name her? He asked. Willow had been considering names for months, but in this moment, only one felt right. Hope, she said. Her name is Hope. The days following Hope's birth brought a new rhythm to the ranch. Willow recovered her strength gradually, while Owen proved surprisingly adept with the baby, often walking the floor with her at night so Willow could rest. As Christmas approached, a letter arrived from Kelton delivered by Mrs. Callahan, who had taken it upon herself to serve as their connection to the outside world. It was from Willow's father. With trembling hands, Willow broke the seal and read. Her father's words were filled with relief at learning she was alive, sorrow for the circumstances that had driven her away, and a desperate plea for her return. "He writes that he's been searching for months," she told Owen that evening as Hope slept peacefully in a cradle he had crafted. "The man who, Hope's father, he apparently returned to Kelton looking for me and father nearly killed him." Owen's expression darkened. "He deserved worse. Father drove him out of town with threats of prosecution." Willow folded the letter carefully. "He wants me to come home. Says nothing matters except that I'm safe." Owen was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Will you go?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. Willow studied Owen's face, noting the tension in his jaw, the careful way he avoided her eyes. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "A month ago I would have said yes without hesitation, but now—" "Now," Owen prompted when she didn't continue. Willow gathered her courage. "Now there's you." Owen's gaze snapped to hers, surprise and something warmer flickering in his eyes. "Me, you saved us," Willow said softly. "But it's more than gratitude I feel, Owen. These past weeks, I've come to care for you deeply." Owen moved from his chair to kneel beside her, taking her hands in his. "I've been afraid to speak, afraid you'd think I was taking advantage of your situation." "And what would you have said if you weren't afraid?" Willow asked, her heart racing. "That I love you," Owen said simply. "That watching you with Hope makes me want things I never thought I'd have: a family, a future shared with someone who sees me for who I really am." Willow reached out to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I see you, Owen Jensen. I see your kindness, your strength, your integrity." Owen turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. "What about your father, Kelton?" "I need to see him," Willow acknowledged, "to make peace. But my home is here now if you'll have us. If I'll have you." Owen laughed softly, incredulously. "Willow Lawson, I'd be the most fortunate man in Wyoming if you and Hope stayed forever." 2 days before Christmas, they made the journey to Kelton. Mrs. Callahan stayed at the ranch with Hope, while Owen accompanied Willow to face her past. The town was decorated for the holiday, wreaths adorning doors and candles glowing in windows. Willow felt stares following them as Owen helped her down from the wagon in front of the mercantile, but she held her head high. George Lawson was behind the counter when they entered, his hair grayer than Willow remembered, new lines etched around his eyes. When he looked up and saw his daughter, the ledger he was writing in fell from nerveless fingers. "Willow," he whispered, as if afraid she might vanish if he spoke too loudly. "Hello, Father," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. In 3 long strides, George crossed the store and enfolded his daughter in an embrace that spoke more eloquently than words of his love and relief. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured into her hair. "When your note said not to look for you, I tried to respect your wishes, but I never stopped hoping you'd return." When they finally separated, Willow introduced Owen. "This is Owen Jensen. He found me in the hills and saved my life, and the life of your granddaughter." George's eyes widened. "Granddaughter, her name is Hope," Willow said. "She's beautiful and healthy and waiting to meet you." Over dinner at her childhood home, Willow and Owen shared the story of their meeting and the months that followed, carefully edited to protect Hope's dignity as she grew older. George listened intently, his gaze moving between his daughter and the quiet cowboy beside her. "You love her," he said to Owen when Willow stepped away to examine her mother's portrait over the mantel. It wasn't a question, but Owen answered anyway. "Yes, sir. More than I thought possible." George nodded slowly, And she loves you. I can see it in how she looks at you." He leaned forward. "Will you marry her, if she'll have me?" Owen replied. "I wanted to speak with you first, out of respect." A smile spread across George's weathered face. "You're a man of honor, Jensen. I'd be proud to call you son." That night, as they prepared to return to Mrs. Callahan's where they were staying, Owen took Willow's hand and led her to the small town square. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the ground with crystalline white. "I had a speech prepared," Owen said, his breath fogging in the cold air. "But seeing you with your father today, I realize life's too uncertain for fancy words." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. She'd want you to have it." Dropping to one knee in the gathering snow, he looked up at Willow, his eyes reflecting the glow of the Christmas lights. "Willow Lawson, will you marry me? Will you and Hope make a family with me?" Tears of joy froze on Willow's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to everything." They were married New Year's Day, 1877, in the front room of Owen's ranch house, now their home. George Lawson gave his daughter away, his eyes misting as he placed her hand in Owen's. Hope, dressed in a christening gown sewn by Mrs. Callahan, slept peacefully through the entire ceremony. The following spring brought new beginnings. The cattle herd expanded, the garden Willow planted flourished, and news spread that George Lawson was selling his mercantile to move closer to his daughter and granddaughter. On a warm June evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Hope asleep in her cradle beside them, Owen took Willow's hand. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Truly happy." Willow leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing through her. "More than I ever thought possible. When I ran to those hills, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." Owen kissed her softly. "We'll tell Hope someday how brave her mother was, how she faced the wilderness alone to protect her. We'll tell her how a good man found us when we needed him most," Willow added, "and brought us down from the hills to a home filled with love." As the last rays of sunlight gilded the distant mountains where their story had begun, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The shame that had driven her to hide had transformed into the pride. She now felt pride in her husband, her daughter, and the woman she had become. In the wild frontier of Wyoming territory, where life was often harsh and unforgiving, she had found not just survival, but joy. And in the arms of the cowboy who had found her at her lowest moment, she had found her highest purpose to love and be loved, without reservation or shame. "Look," Owen murmured, pointing to the horizon where the first stars were appearing. "A new day ends and a new night begins." "That's life, isn't it? Always moving forward." "Forward together," Willow agreed, her fingers entwined with his, their shared future stretching before them like the endless Wyoming sky.